I said, eyes narrowed. We had both, admittedly, been spending way too much time in the shop lately. Some days, it didn't feel like we had much of a choice if we wanted to keep the lights on. She sighed and lowered herself onto a stool beside me, hands braced on the worktop. I was planning on finishing this arrangement once the dahlias were finally delivered, since you're supposed to be moving today. She trailed off, prompting me to fill in the blanks. Which I will be, just as soon as I finish this, I said, picking at a singular dry leaf and keeping my eyes locked on my work. I was only moving across the city, so I wasn't sure what the big deal was. I'd moved before, more than once. Across the Atlantic, in fact. But always on my own, and never into a warehouse conversion with 7 other roommates. Renee took her turn swatting my hand from the flowers. It's finished, Luce. Her tone was firm, but not unkind. And I knew it was her way of shooing me out the door. But the delivery, I tried, will be handled by Carla when she arrives later this morning. Carla was our new part-time hire, and I hadn't yet gotten used to having the extra weekend help. It's taken care of. Go. Those last bits aren't going to pack themselves. She nodded in the direction of the door, and I had no choice but to obey. As much as I hated to admit it, Renee did usually know best. Call me if there are any issues, I said from the doorway. I can assure you the only issue is how late you're going to be if you don't get moving. I rolled my eyes and let the door close behind me, the familiar chimes announcing my departure. The last bits Renee was referring to were basically the entire contents of my apartment. When I got home, I stood barefoot on the kitchen tile and looked at the piles in the living room still waiting to be boxed. Records, books, mugs, more throw blankets than I could count. Does everyone amass this much shit when they're living alone? In truth, I loved all my shit. In my tiny studio, there was a place for everything, and it all seemed to serve a purpose. So what if I was one person with 18 mugs? Maybe I was prone to 18 different moods, each of which required a specific mug. It had been less than 4 weeks since my landlord announced he was selling the building to a major conglomerate, and the rent was set to double. I was almost certain it wasn't legal, but then again, I'm almost certain nothing about being a landlord in London is legal, so I wasn't prepared to take him to court. I already knew there was no money in the North London Lotus for a raise. I had no choice but to move out. In the week following the letter from my landlord, I did a lot of crying. Giving up my freedom to wander around in my underwear all day, or put leftovers in the refrigerator with the confidence that they'd still be there in the morning, felt like a tragedy. When I signed the lease, I had bragged to my friends that it was too good to be true. And after 2 years, this city had, once again, proven me right. Once I had gotten my act together and resumed behaving like an adult, I called Raja for advice. We had been roommates in college, and she was practically the patron saint of inexpensive housing. She was pursuing an MBA and living on a student's budget in Seven Sisters, so I figured she'd have some advice. What I did not figure was that she'd offer me a room in her warehouse apartment. You have to come live with us, Lou, she'd said over drinks in a local pub one night soon after I got the letter. Alice just moved out to live with her horrible boyfriend. Remember them? So her room is free. We haven't even listed it yet. And there's a studio space if you ever pry yourself from the shop and want to do some floristry at home. It's perfect, really. There was little chance of convincing Raja otherwise when she thought she had a brilliant idea. But when she saw me waffling, staring into my gin and tonic, and contemplating going from a studio to an apartment with 7 roommates, she delivered her final argument. Besides, she said, you have nowhere else to go. Silence settled around us, satisfied on Raja's end and uncomfortable on mine. She was right. I'd been on my own since I moved here from Long Island for undergrad, and I had little going on outside the shop. Plus, I was becoming more insecure about my paycheck by the day, so my back was against the wall. And with this arrangement, I wouldn't have to stretch that paycheck to make rent.